So coming back to the question, what is depicted and how is it depicted? Here is an image I made. So I know about the history of it, and I can tell you there was no premeditated future use of it, but nevertheless I have used it in the lecture. So I'm asking you now to test yourselves and me, what is depicted and how is it depicted?
Body and glass of wine.
Yeah, there are already some from further questions. We can leave it there. Half of mankind, or even more, would consider this image probably slightly erotic, due to the fact, nevertheless, that there is nothing that describes us, this erotic field. But let's leave that aside. I can tell you it was purely accidental that this image was on the photograph. So I was not concentrating it nor even noticing it when I was making the photograph, which shows us that the proportional system or cropping of the image really has a fundamental decision what is understood in this entangled meanings. But I come back to the photograph. I found what it was about. So if we frame now the image newly again, the photograph loses its importance. Can you recognize what was depicted in the lower part of the first image? From the context. Pardon? No, it's actually a fireplace decoration. So there is a fireplace there. I would make that type of suggestion myself if I was looking at it with fresh eyes, but I of course know that it is a restaurant. What about this guy? His name is David Porter, he's architect. Can we assume that he is in that restaurant? How we can assume that? The table is similar, there is the beam, and even the edge of the fireplace with the candle that was described in the previous image are definitely there. So our mind really puts these things together, even if we are not really concentrating. I remember once a puzzle in a place where I was several times. It was a rented apartment, and there were 3 photographs on the wall. Each of them was depicting a city, and seemingly it was different cities. But there was a kind of nagging feeling that maybe the photographs are somehow connected, even though they were not in the same discourse, even as framed or similarly colored photographs. And probably after 3 weeks, my mind put it together where these photographs were taken, because of the church spires that were hardly visible on the photographs. But suddenly it clicked together, and I understood from which directions the photographs were made, and the unconscious part or the motoric trained part of understanding the space we share made the image, the meaning of the image clear to me, which happens here as well. As soon as we have enough time, which we don't, we can see that this guy is sitting in some kind of a restaurant. Actually, I might say it's a pub. So that gives a kind of indication where it is, which is not really important. We go further, and suddenly the first image has totally lost its original setting, original energy, and even friction. And we're looking at a large canvas, several actions, several objects, and several moods. I would like you to describe what you think architect David Porter is feeling. Is he glad? Is he sad? Is he meditating? How would you interpret his facial expression. Pardon? Could be concerned. When looking at the photograph, I very often thought he's a bit sad, although there was no reason, at least. We had finished our work, it was done, it was a pub. There's another image of him. Can you see his facial expression change? Or not really? Well, maybe I'm thinking too much into it. As soon as I made these two compositions out of the same photograph, I saw the facial expression change, but that might be my imagination and cannot be really tested on you guys. Then I'll take it back. Maybe it doesn't change, but at least it changes the whole image of the photograph. It changes the whole feeling. That's no doubt. And this is the full canvas of this particular place. It was quite accidental. I did the photograph, and there was nothing to use it for or imagine that I would use it for. But nevertheless, if we look at two of these images, we clearly see that they are different. But we don't really, without effort or focused attention, we do not really understand where is the difference. Who thinks the left-hand side is more dynamic? Please raise your hand. And the alternative is, who thinks the other side is more dynamic? Please show of hands. So it doesn't work like I expected it will work, but nevertheless it looks like this part of the image is more dynamic. I agree with that, and I'll try to find out where this dynamism of the image comes. Of course, this is just a very superficial analysis of the proportional system, also the meaning system, because the faces, of course, are much more important in a photograph than other things very often. So the spatial and facial expressions I was giving more power than maybe I should have been. But nevertheless, when we now look at the purely formal analysis or purely formal lines of the photograph, we actually can see my line of thought of faces and important expressions is much more dynamic than the more centralized and more balanced side on the right-hand side. So this is what I mean when I'm talking about proportional and compositional system of image. We do not really look at it, we do not really understand it, we just take it, and very often the creativity of the image or the power of the image embedded by the author can actually influence how we feel about the image. Just as an example of how these meanings can change in the entangled explosion of image that will be sent all over the world, that there are on top of the projectional and spatial system of images, if they do exhibit or seemingly exhibit space, and the proportional system and compositional system have underground or deeper underlying influences to what we see and how we approach the image. Of course, we can go further here, which I have not really done. And then finding I was just curious, even the question would be if this is a woman, which is meaningful only with a filled glass from the viewpoint of play of visual images, and it is Shema Mados without title, and closer look at the photograph will reveal us that probably it is a woman he has been using for this kind of play of visual imagery. So the system of proportion and composition usually escapes our attention and we very often do not include it into the energy field how we imagine the image presented to us. All these autonomous qualities of an image add a layer of complexity and transformability within the virtual presence, when the surface of the frame and of the image disappear. But within the virtual presence that we need to look further in our next lectures, there already the proportional, compositional, dimensional and spatial image will be produced by someone else. Otherwise, it will not be three-dimensional in virtual presence. So if we think of image as we know it since the cognitive revolution, which is thought to have happened 60,000 years before this time, 2 or 3,000 years do not really make any difference here. From this moment to the present time, the images have had that type of characteristics. But now within the virtual presence, they will be added a next layer of spatial proportional system by the author of that particular virtual reality or virtual presence. Now, here we were last time looking at 3 images, and here I would briefly look at them. There is the lion, there is the Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny, and then there is the famous cartoon that cost several lives. Atif Syed made this image, and as soon as I saw it for the first time, it was clear to me that I've never seen a lion depicted in that way. And it looked weird to me because any of the photographs or films have not really presented a male angry lion in the face of an angry cat, which we definitely have seen. The problem that I've not imagined that this could be the case, of course, is that I've never faced a lion. Very few people have faced the angry lion as he did, and this photograph, in a way, is a lucky accident, and he escaped with his life. But it shows a totally different line of representing a lion than I previously have experienced. But then thinking further about it, I suddenly remembered that actually this facial expression has been used before, and I've never really understood why these lions or lion-like animals, why do they have this kind of slightly wrinkled upper part of their nose? And we can go through several of them, and the realization of these images suddenly give us a understanding that these images who built this type of canon of depicting a lion probably had seen lion in this form. So even in the very abstract depiction of the lion, we can clearly see the same type of facial expression of the lion. So these people definitely have seen or copied the canon that somehow, at least for me, was forgotten or was never pointed at, which of course through the possibility of comparing so many images now suddenly becomes totally clear. But then again, there is another image of lion where it is not depicted the same way. Actually, it is depicted totally differently. I would rather say that it is an anthropomorphical image of a lion. And it comes to us from the Venice military port, besides Arsenale, where there are 3 lions. I have been looking at the lions, I have made the photographs of them, not really going into the meanings that were attached to it. But now with Wikipedia and other sources, it was very easy to find where the lions come from and what was their meaning of these lions. They come actually from Athens. And around the Mediterranean, of course, you can always see a Mediterranean port, which is called Venetian port, because they took hold of the whole Mediterranean, at least most of it, and built their military strongholds and fort posts in different harbors. And in the case of these lions, it was in 1687 when these two lions, which are on the two sides of the main gate, are brought from Athens, and probably they have been sculpted around 360 years before Christ. And one of them definitely has been used as a fountain. So the meaning field of these lions, which I remembered due to the image of this fantastic angry lion, suddenly came back to me and in a way unfolded for me the meaning of these statues. It even goes a bit further, because on one of the lions there is a graffiti or inscription, and it is discussed that it is probably the Vikings who have been hired by the Byzantine king and who have been operating within conquering Athens for Byzantine Empire, and then added these graffiti, which you can read on the lion. So the lion becomes not just an old sculpture removed several times, but also a manifestation of several events that become now the part of its meaning for me. Asmund cut these runes with Asgeir and Thorleif, Thord and Ivar at the request of Harald the Tall, though the Greeks considered about and forbade it. Of course, they didn't want their lion to be covered with graffiti. And the third lion probably even comes a little bit further away in the time, from the 6th century before Christ, and it is believed that its head has been changed. And now we look at the head, and this lion is totally different from the one Said was making his photograph. I would even say it is more human than lion-like. And the expression of this lion still has this mystery of non-knowledge to us, until we find out what this lion really is about, and until this image becomes a project with the information embedded in it about the lion, the material, the proportions, and so on. So this is the entangled meaning explosion which really caught me looking at Said's photograph of lion. And quite accidentally, after I saw this sad lion, I also see this most sad dog in my life sitting on the floor of the small restaurant there. And when we look at, and we can imagine, when we look at his eyes, he knows how ugly and sad he is, which of course has nothing to do with the reality itself. It is purely meaning and anthropomorphic interpretation of mine into that image. But nevertheless, a sad dog, a very sad dog.